The endless sea of tiny grains of quartz and feldspar that form the rolling waves of Mesquite Flat sand dunes greeted me with the coolness and silence of the early morning. Here and there, the green branches of a flowering mesquite tree sway gently in the wind, slightly enlivening an area that at first glance seemed completely devoid of life. The sun, hanging just above the horizon with its soft light, highlights the wrinkles running through the sand, giving it extraordinary plasticity, as if there were still goosebumps on the surface of those sandy hills after a cold night. A night during which this inhospitable land was an area of activity for its inhabitants. The dunes have no marked trail because of the continually shifting desert sands, so improvise exploring it. But above all, experience it with all your senses. Warm shades of gold mixed with quietness of the dunes. What better environment can you ask for to clear your mind? It's peacefully quiet, no distractions of any kind. The air is clean, fresh, and the warm sand is soothing beneath your feet. You can find 3 different types of dunes at Mesquite Flat: crescent, linear, and star-shaped. In some lower areas, you may notice a white tilled flooring under the sand. This is a polygon cracked clay floor, all that remains of the ancient lake that used to be here. A walk on these silky, rippled dunes will convince you that you are someplace far from the familiar. How far you wander is completely up to you. The best time to visit is just before sunrise or around sunset, because as the sun rises or sets, a spectacular display of color with long shadows and soft light highlights the ripples that run through the sand in great contrast. This is the place where golden hour is truly golden. Long shadows are cast down over the ridge tops, making for spectacular photo opportunities. The sand felt great between my toes in this mild April weather, but I can imagine extreme summer heat would make it too hot to be barefoot, or even in sandals. But when I started my walk there, the sand felt surprisingly cold until the sun came up. Be prepared for some heavy footwork. The dunes are strange to tackle. This dune system covers a vast area and is formed at the convergence of several prevailing winds in the valley. The tiny grains of sand began as much larger pieces of solid rock. The erosion caused by wind and rain eventually break the rocks and sediment down into sand, which is carried across Death Valley by the winds and then eventually pile up at places like this, where some sort of natural wind barriers prevents it from scattering beyond the dunes. This is a great photography location, so I dive into the dunes a bit to capture this magical combination of colors and textures. All those soft shapes caught in the middle of the fight between day and night were breathtaking. While visiting, you can choose between walking to the larger dune than others, which is the most popular one, but it's a farther hike out, or choose other direction and find secluded spot on other parts of this little Sahara desert. I've chosen the second option. After a few hours of wandering, I set off southwest towards Eagle Point, where the Joshua Tree is present, driving CA 190 highway, but before I reached the spot, I took quite unexpectedly Darwin Falls Trail just because I noticed it was unpaved one, and after a few kilometers of driving on old toll road, I found leftovers of mine or something. Searching the internet to find out what it could be, I found an information about a mine lying northwest of Darwin between Zinc Hill and Ophir Mountain, exactly like this one. It was called the Zinc Hill mine and was one of the biggest zinc producers in Inyo County, and from 1917 to 1920, this mine was the major zinc producer in California. Several shafts had inclined tramways and aerial tram lines connecting them to the Puck Trail. This undulating highway to heaven was part of CA 190 road on the west side of the Death Valley. Not much you can find along the way, but those little details are what make such road trips special for us Europeans in this part of the world. This road may seem boring, but these types of views always excites me. Same with Joshua trees. Trees that are actually plants. They don't have growth rings, making it difficult to know their exact age, and the average Joshua tree's lifespan is 150 years, but read they could potentially live up to 1,000 years. They've been around since the Pleistocene era, which was 2.5 million years ago, but unfortunately, here climate change has impact too, and they may disappear by 2070. However, the tree I was after during that trip was sort of famous Joshua tree from the U2 album cover of the same title. Now, it is fallen Joshua tree as it's dead unfortunately, but it's a kind of an altar to die-hard fans and was interesting to visit. Visitors from around the world come with all sorts of mementos, leaving them here. One particularly ardent fan brought a metal briefcase to provide others a safe place to store all those things and leave personal messages. After 4 decades after album release, what strikes pretty hard about Joshua Tree isn't just the album's music, but the fact that people are venturing into the remote California desert to see a dead tree because of indelible power of its name and memories associated with. On my way from Death Valley towards Sierra Nevada mountains, I drove through this ghost town. History of this settlement that gained reputation of rowdy and violent one is quite interesting. Almost 150 years ago, it was the biggest town in Inyo County, supporting over 1,000 people and even 3,500 in 1877, but today Darwin's population is estimated at just about 35. On the hillside of Mount Ophir can still be seen the remains of the company camp, including decaying rows of company houses, scattered and rusted mining machinery, and the remains of rusted-out hulks of vehicles and trailers. The weathered Darwin Post Office, whose busted windows are covered in plywood, is a stark example of a uniquely American place with a Wild West ethos. After plus 37 Celsius degrees on the desert, it was quite unexpected to experience minus 3 Celsius the same day, but it was exactly what happened when I reached Sierra Nevada mountains and the glistering waters of Mono Lake next morning. Mono Lake is the oldest lake in America. Some say it's 760,000 years old, others say it's 1 million years old. The basin is a land of extremes. Very old features like the Sierra Nevada in the distance, next to very young ones like Panamon Crater, landscapes created by volcanoes next to those sculptured by glaciers. You can take a walk along its western shore along the Mono Lake Trail. It leads along wooden piers across a meadow by the lake and is located in the immediate vicinity of the parking lot in the Picnic Grounds Road. Mono Lake owes its uniqueness to limestone tuffs, which are pillars formed hundreds of years ago at the bottom of the lake. Tuffs began to rise out of the water as the level of Mono Lake began to drop rapidly. This happened after the city of Los Angeles began drawing water from it in 1941. When the lake level dropped by 15 meters, the alarm began to sound because Mono Lake is a valuable ecosystem and a refuge for many bird species. The water in the lake is currently 2.5 times saltier and 80 times alkaline as the seawater. It has been called a dead sea, but it's actually abounds with life. Few organisms can tolerate Mono's salty alkaline water, but these few species thrive in astronomical numbers. It is an oasis for hundreds of species of birds, many of which rely exclusively on alkali flies and brine shrimps, found nowhere else in the world. The lake is crucial habitat for California gulls, eared grebes, and phalaropes. No fish can live in Mono Lake's salty alkaline waters. But let's get back to tuffs. The tuffs were formed by mixing of calcium-rich water from underground freshwater springs with salty waters of the lake. As a result of a chemical reaction, calcium carbonate, limestone, is formed. Calcium carbonate settles as a solid around the spring and thus forms a tuff column. One of the strangest birds you can see on Mono Lake is the fish-eating osprey. Why the strangest? Because, as I mentioned, there are no fish in the lake. Since osprey feed mainly on fish, the unusual ecological situation in Mono Lake seems completely unsuitable for them, but seems like nesting in tuff towers surrounded by hypersaline and hyperalkaline waters give them a distinct advantage: low rates of predation of eggs and hatchlings by terrestrial animals. Mono Lake's modern landscape has been shaped over millions of years by faulting and volcanic activity. On the northwest shore of Mono Lake there is a low volcanic hill, composed of ash and brownish-yellow conglomerate. For the last 3 to 4 million years, the whole basin has been tilting westward and sinking while the Sierra has been rising. This ongoing process has created the majestic contrast of a desert lake bordered by high mountain peaks. As the western floor of the Mono Basin slipped downwards, its southern and northern margins tilted slowly towards its center, forming a bathtub-like basin that filled with water to form Mono Lake and become a stop for more than 80 species of migratory birds. Mono Lake's tuffus towers are a spectacular example of what nature can do with a few basic elements and how it can adapt to seemingly completely unfavorable conditions. And that's how this short 4-day trip ends. Have you been to places I showed here? Do you love it or hate it? Comment below and let me know. I'd love to hear about your experience. And if you like those little productions of mine, there's plenty of other movies on my channel. Please subscribe, comment and share. All those photos presented in this series can also be purchased as prints.